Thank you. You may be seated. I want you to come with me this morning, and we're going to get into our magic time machine. And I want you to travel with me in our magic time machine this morning back to the first century. We're going to a hill known as Golgotha. And standing there on that hill called Golgotha, I want you to see something. I want you to see a death that is beyond human comprehension. I want you there to see a pain that is so deep and so intense that it will make every one of us shudder. I want you to see the blood, red human blood, the blood that flows down the brow of Jesus Christ. The blood that covers his hands and covers his feet. I want you this morning to see Jesus. I want you to see him beaten, spit upon, and dying. And as you witness this scene on Golgotha, I want you to realize that Mary watched him there. She had been a young Jewish girl when she had been chosen by God to give birth to the Messiah. And now she's at the cross on Golgotha's hill, watching the baby she gave birth to, the baby she had seen grow to manhood, the one she had cared for. She remembers him telling her at the age of 12 that he must be about the Father's business. And now, she's watching him do the Father's business. Because there he is, hanging on a cross. What Mary saw that day, no mother should ever have to witness. But Mary was there, and she watched him. And this morning I want you to see the other women that were there who watched him also. The Bible doesn't tell us who they were. I feel very confident that the woman that Jesus healed of her infirmity of 18 years was there. I would certainly expect to see the woman there whose son Jesus had raised from the dead. Probably the woman was there whose daughter Jesus had cast demons from. We aren't told exactly who all was there. But obviously they had not forgotten Jesus. Because Jesus was the one who had changed their lives. The priests were there, the elders were there, they watched him also. The two thieves that he was crucified with watched him there that day. I want you to see something else though. I want you to see the group of soldiers as they gathered around those three crosses on Golgotha. Because the soldiers are sitting there, they're watching, and they're waiting. Maybe they're the same soldiers that had come to the Garden of Gethsemane the night before. They may be the same soldiers that bound him and led him away to Pilate and to Herod. It's possible they were the same soldiers who had whipped him mercilessly. The ones who beat him with their fists, the ones that spit on him. Some of those soldiers who are watching him die will probably be the same ones that will guard the tomb where he will be buried. But for now, Those soldiers have finished the last work of the day. They've already nailed their victims to their respective crosses. They've placed those crosses upright in the ground. And now the soldiers have nothing left to do but sit and wait for these three men to die. I want you to look at those soldiers closely. I want you to look at the clothes those soldiers are wearing. Clothes flecked with blood spatter from driving nails and spikes into living flesh. And now they're trying to pass away these tedious hours as best they can. Because you see, death by crucifixion is a very slow process. And when you don't have anything to do but sit and wait for men to die, boredom sets in rather quickly. Some of them have amused themselves by gambling for a time for the seamless robe that belonged to one of the men. And that done, there's nothing left to do but sit and wait. And Matthew tells us in Matthew 27, verse 36, sitting down, they watched him. And while they're waiting, while they're sitting there in their boredom, waiting for these three men to die, they're startled. And they're startled by a wild cry that comes from the man hanging on the central cross when he says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. And all the soldiers look at each other quizzically. They're all alike. They all heard the cry of agony. And they're also alike in they did not fully understand what was being said. Because the man on the central cross, Jesus Christ, was not speaking in Latin. He was using what to these soldiers was a foreign tongue, and he seemed to be calling on a man by the name of Elijah. And yet, while they did not fully understand it, they knew it was a cry that was born of suffering. It was a pathetic hand reaching out into that encircling gloom of that day, longing for help. They heard the cry, and they had a partial understanding of its meaning, but they did not all make the same response. The tragic cry of Jesus from the cross divided those men that day into two very distinct groups. There was one who sought to help Jesus in his suffering, while the others did absolutely nothing. There was an unknown hero that day who became part of the remedy. The others chose to remain part of the disease. Our text comes from Matthew 27, verses 48 and 49. And straightway one of them ran, and took a sponge, and filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave him to drink. The rest said, Let it be, and let us see whether Elias or Elijah will come to save him. This was an altogether unique scene that day, because we're dealing with a historic fact. This is a historical event that took place on a certain day, on a certain hill. And the cry of Jesus that day was a cry that no one had ever uttered just the way that Jesus uttered it. And yet, while there are unique situations in this scene on Golgotha, there are also things that are eternal and things that are abiding there. You see, that cry of Jesus as He hung there on that cross is a cry of pain. It's a cry of anguish that's as old as human suffering and as new as today's tragedies. Whatever the case, whatever the cause, humanity is constantly being nailed to some kind of a cross. Look where you will, in any age, in any period of time, and you're going to see pathetic hands that are stretched out for help. Listen to any day in human history, and you're going to hear the cry of suffering men and suffering women. Watch the news broadcast today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and you're going to hear the same wail of agony that was heard on that cross. And not only does this cry of suffering belong to every day of human history, it makes itself heard by everyone. The difference is that some people hear it with more sensitive ears than others do. Some are more deeply stirred by it than others are. And even though we may stop our ears to this cry, we can't be completely deaf to it. Over and over and over, it breaks our complacency. It breaks our love of ease. It breaks our indifference. And this cry of suffering humanity disturbs us. And disturbed, yes, we make our varied responses like those soldiers in the first century did. The call of need, we hear it. Whether we want to hear it or not, we hear it. Hearing is not an option. What we do about the suffering cry of lost humanity is optional. There are two things in that scene from the cross that endure. One of those is the cry of the anguished need of that man hanging on the central cross. And secondly, there are those who are compelled to hear that cry and make some kind of response to it. It was that way on Calvary's Hill. It's that way today. Some of those soldiers said, well, let us see if Elijah is going to come and save him. Let's just wait and see what's going to happen. Well, that sounds like kind of a harmless attitude, doesn't it? They didn't scold Jesus for his outcry. They didn't add to his pain by any kind of personal violence. And not just that. They didn't say, well, never under any circumstances are we going to hell. They just simply said, well, we're not going to do anything right now. We're just going to sit back and see what happens. Why would they do that? Why would they choose to do absolutely nothing? Well, one of them might have said, well, my name's not Elijah. He didn't call for me. Since he didn't call on me, it's not any of my business. You can hear that, can't you? Here's a revelation for all of us this morning. Are you listening? When we come face to face with something that needs to be done, that we can do to help, That is a call to us. It is as real and genuine as if God had written our names in letters of fire somewhere up in the sky. We go from generation to generation offering the same excuses that the soldiers offered that day at Golgotha. Someone else said, well, I'm not Elijah. He didn't ask me. Not my business. Another one said, I saw the need was there, but it's none of my business what that need was. Yeah, I'm sorry about it. I drove by, I saw your house was on fire, and I knew your child was asleep in the house, but hey man, I'm not a firefighter. Yes, I was driving down the highway. I knew and saw the bridge was out, but there was nothing I could do to warn anybody. I don't work for the highway department. Yes, I knew the man was hungry, but I didn't feed him. I'm not the United Way or the Salvation Army or anything or the community chest. Get off my back. Yes, I am quite aware that my neighbor is in need of the gospel. I'm quite aware that my neighbor is not a Christian and something needs to be done about it, but there's not anything I can do. I'm not the preacher. I saw the man had been robbed. I saw he was bleeding to death on the side of the road. But I'm not a nurse or a physician. There wasn't anything I could do. Write this down. It's on your final exam. When we see a need that we can help in any way to meet, God is then and there calling our name. Someone else said, well, I heard the cry, and I knew there was a desperate need, but I had enough confidence in my faith. I just couldn't believe that no one was going to do anything. So I waited in the hope that Elijah or someone would take the matter seriously and do something about it. I thought if I waited long enough, somebody else would do the job and I wouldn't have to be bothered. Friends, we should ask, Lord, how much can I do? Not, Lord, how little can I give out? There's one more reason the soldiers might have given. A reason that's probably more compelling than any of the others. You heard the cry. Why didn't you help? Well, I wanted to. But the situation just seemed utterly hopeless. There was just so little I could do. Rome had arrested this man. Rome had sentenced him to death. And by this time, the agony of that cross had almost done all of its work. There was so little life left in him, he seemed little better than dead already anyway. What could I have possibly done? What good could I have done for him? I couldn't take him from Rome. I couldn't restore his health. I couldn't give him back to his friends. Since I couldn't do everything, I just decided I'd do nothing. That same dismal condition and attitude and consideration is especially prevalent in our day and time. And it's an attitude that threatens to lay its paralyzing hands on every one of us. Why are we here this morning? We're met here this morning to worship the God of heaven. And there's a sobering fact we need to face and realize. That after 2,000 years of Christian preaching and 2,000 years of Christian teaching, the vast majority of our world still does not know Jesus Christ. And today, right now, in this country that has "In God We Trust" printed on its currency, you have those in this country today doing everything in their power to make sure people never know Jesus Christ. And in the face of this kind of widespread tragedy, what can I do? What can we do? We can tell our neighbors. We can tell our friends. We can tell our family members about Jesus Christ. We can attempt to wake the world up to the fact that Jesus Christ is a reality. Jesus Christ changes lives. Maybe those soldiers that day at Golgotha didn't do anything because they felt hopeless and they felt overwhelmed. We can't change the world all at once. We can't just up and snap our fingers and change the world. But we can change the world one heart at a time. We can change the world one life at a time. One of those soldiers that day had a more hopeful reading of things than the others. He ran and he got a sponge and he dipped it into his daily portion of sour wine and he put it on a reed and he gave it to Jesus to drink. He didn't really know what this dying man was asking for. But he did know that one of the tortures of crucifixion was a burning thirst. And so he chose to share with Jesus his bit of wine, his bit of allotment for the day. When I think about that unknown hero, when I think about that soldier that day at Golgotha, my heart grows warm to him. He seems like a man that was worth knowing. There was something that needed to be done. And without waiting to see what others would do, he took it upon himself. That soldier belongs to that select company that perform deeds that nobody has the right to ask them to do, but they do. It's when we, in that same way, get under burdens voluntarily. We get under burdens voluntarily for love's sake that we come to live in the Spirit of the cross. Look at those that day who said, well, let's see if Elias is going to come to save it. Let's see if Elijah's going to come and take care of it. What did they miss? They missed the privilege of helping. They might have been of service to Jesus in those dark hours of his extremity. And while they did nothing, Jesus died. Something like that is always taking place when we refuse to help. Remember, Jesus said, whosoever shall save his life shall lose it. It was right after that he said to those that were listening that those who come after him must take up their cross, deny self, and follow Jesus. So it is. When we find men and women whose one business in life is to look out for themselves, what do we find? When we find those whose one business in life is to look after themselves, we find sad, fed up, disillusioned souls that aren't really living. But what about this man? What about this unknown soldier? What about this hero? Having shared his bit of sour wine with Jesus, I'm confident he came to feel the real thrill of living. He couldn't bring Jesus down from the cross. He couldn't save his life. But he could, in some small way, provide the comfort, what comfort he was able to provide. Like Mary, who anointed Jesus with the expensive ointment, he did what he could. But what about us this morning? What about us? What is our relationship to Jesus this morning? Is Jesus the Lord and Master of our lives? Or are we just watching from the fringes of the crowd? Don't leave this building this morning simply being a spectator at the cross. All of us can do what that unknown hero did that day. All of us can give Jesus the best that we have to offer. If we give Jesus the very best that we have to offer, one day we'll hear him say, "Well done, good faithful servant. Enter thou into the joys of our Lord." Are you giving him the best? Is he the Lord and Master of all of your life, or do you need to make changes? Can we help you make those changes? Give us the opportunity to do that as we stand.